would simply break the minds of every pilot in the enemy fleet, and the rebellion would end before the final battle began. Its power touched the minds of the Veth. They were easy to read. Simple thoughts of duty and hive and service. The first voice could have controlled them like puppets. Its power touched the minds of the Windborn. They thought in patterns of wind and current and flow, different but still predictable, still breakable. Then its power touched human minds. The first voice recoiled. Human consciousness was chaos. Humans did not think in straight lines. They held contradictions in their heads without going mad. They loved and hated the same things. They feared death and ran toward it. They remembered grudges for generations and forgave their worst enemies in a heartbeat. They believed impossible things before breakfast. The first voice tried to find a pattern, something it could exploit, something it could control. But there was nothing. Human minds were like fire, beautiful and dangerous, and completely impossible to hold. "What are you?" the first voice demanded. Its question echoed across every frequency, reaching every ship in both fleets. Admiral Okonkwo answered. His voice was calm and steady. "We are humanity. We do not make sense. We do not follow your rules. And we do not lose." He gave the order to attack. The battle for Dominion Prime lasted 9 days. It was the largest battle in the history of the galaxy. Ships exploded like fireworks in the night sky. Billions of lives hung in the balance. The fate of every species in existence would be decided by what happened in the next few hours. The 12 fought with powers that bent reality itself. They threw asteroids at enemy ships. They created black holes that swallowed entire squadrons. They reached into minds and turned friends against friends, but they could not touch the humans. And wherever humans led, others followed. The Veth found courage they never knew they had. The Windborn discovered that they could fight as fiercely as any warrior species. 32 species became one army, united by a single idea, that freedom was worth any price. On the 6th day, the second voice fell. A combined strike from 12 human destroyers caught it while its attention was elsewhere. The ancient being had lived for 40,000 years. It died screaming. On the 8th day, 3 more of the 12 were destroyed. They had never imagined that they could be killed. They had never prepared for the possibility of death. When they realized they could die, they became afraid, and fear made them weaker. On the 9th day, only the first voice remained. It floated alone above its homeworld, surrounded by the debris of its fleet, its fellow gods dead or dying around it. It looked at the Liberation fleet and knew that it had lost. For the first time in its ancient existence, the first voice faced defeat. Admiral Okonkwo hailed the being. "This is over. Your empire is finished. Your fleet is destroyed. Your brothers and sisters are gone. Surrender, and we will spare your life. You will be exiled to the void between galaxies. You will have eternity to think about what you did wrong." The first voice was silent for a long time. Then it asked one final question. "Why? We gave the galaxy order. We gave it purpose. We gave it peace. Why would you destroy everything we built?" It was Dr. Yuki Tanaka who answered. She had come to Dominion Prime with the fleet. She wanted to see the end of the empire that had killed her family. "You did not give the galaxy peace," she said. "You gave it slavery. You did not give it purpose. You gave it chains. And you did not give it order. You gave it fear. What we have given the galaxy is something you never understood. We have given it hope." The first voice looked at the small human woman who had helped destroy an empire that had lasted 50,000 years. It tried to understand her. It failed. Then it turned and fled into the darkness between galaxies. It would spend eternity there, alone, trying to understand how primitive creatures with chaotic minds had brought down gods. The Liberation fleet landed on Dominion Prime as liberators, not conquerors. They freed the billions of servants who had never known any other life. They opened the prisons that had held political enemies for centuries. They tore down the temples where the 12 had been worshipped as gods in the months that followed. The liberated species formed a new government. They called it the Galactic Concordat. It was not an empire. It was an alliance of equals. Every species had a voice. Every world had a vote. No one would ever be enslaved again. Humanity was offered the leadership of this new order. They had started the revolution. They had led the fleet. They deserved to rule. They said no. Ambassador Chen Wei spoke at the founding ceremony of the Concordat. Her words became the foundation of the new galactic law. We did not fight for power. We did not fight for glory. We fought because every thinking being deserves to be free. Let this be the lesson the galaxy never forgets. Control is an illusion. Freedom is a choice, and we will always choose to be free. The stars burned brighter that night. Or perhaps they only seemed brighter to eyes that were finally free to look up without fear. The galaxy had been reborn, and humanity had lit the fire that burned away the darkness. By dawn, it was over. The sky above Earth was filled with debris that had once been the compliance fleet. 3,000 ships destroyed. Millions of Dominion soldiers killed. The greatest military disaster in 50,000 years. Dr. Yuki Tanaka emerged from her bunker for the first time in months. She walked outside and looked up at the night sky. Pieces of Dominion ships fell through the atmosphere, burning like shooting stars. It was beautiful. She thought about her husband. She thought about her daughter. She thought about everyone who had died so that this moment could happen. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." But she knew this was not the end. The Dominion was vast. They would send more ships. They would come for revenge. Earth had won a battle, but the war was just beginning. Across the galaxy, the news of Earth's victory spread faster than light. Species that had been enslaved for centuries heard the impossible story. A primitive planet had destroyed a Dominion fleet. The masters could be beaten. The chains could be broken. For the first time in 50,000 years, the enslaved peoples of the galaxy began to hope, and humanity was just getting started. The story of Earth's victory traveled across, stars like a fire through dry grass. Within days, every inhabited world in the galaxy had heard what happened. A primitive species with no mental powers, no advanced technology, no allies had destroyed the mightiest fleet the Dominion had ever sent against a single planet. It should have been impossible. Everyone knew that resisting the Dominion was suicide. Everyone knew that the masters could not be beaten. Everyone knew that hope was foolish and dangerous. But everyone had been wrong. The Dominion of 12 responded to the disaster with fury. They assembled the Grand Armada, a force so large that it had not been gathered in 20,000 years. 40,000 warships from every corner of their empire. Armies from 100 conquered worlds. And at the head of this armada came the 12 themselves. The 12 were the oldest beings in the galaxy. They had lived for longer than most stars. Their minds were so powerful that they could break a planet with a thought. They could control the minds of entire species. They could see the future and change the past. They were not generals or politicians. They were gods, or close enough that the difference did not matter. The first voice. The eldest of the 12 sent a message to Earth. Its words echoed in the mind of every human on the planet. "You have done something that has never been done before. You have surprised us. You have impressed us. But do not mistake a single victory for the end of war. We are coming. Not with a fleet this time. We are coming ourselves. And when we arrive, your species will learn what happens to those who dare to challenge the eternal order of the galaxy. There will be no second chances. There will be no mercy. There will be only ash where your world used to be." Humanity had won a battle. Now they faced the true enemy. And they knew they could not win alone. Ambassador Chen Wei had been a diplomat before the invasion. She had spent her life trying to build bridges between human nations. Now, she would try to build bridges between species. The United Earth Council gave her one mission: find allies or humanity would die. Her first stop was the Galactic Forum. This was a place where representatives from conquered species were allowed to gather and speak. They had no power there. They were only allowed to watch and listen. But Chen Wei had not come to watch. She walked into the great hall where 1,000 species sat in silence. They looked at her with eyes and sensors and organs she could not recognize. They were afraid. They had been afraid for so long that they had forgotten what courage felt like. Chen Wei stood at the center of the hall and spoke. I know what they told you. They told you that resistance was impossible. They told you that hope was dangerous. They told you that you were alone and weak and helpless. They told you those things because they were afraid of what would happen if you ever stopped believing them. She pointed toward the ceiling, toward the stars beyond. Earth is proof that they lied. We are not special. We are not stronger than you. We are not smarter than you. We are just a small species that decided we would rather die than kneel. And when we made that choice, we discovered something wonderful. The masters are not as powerful as they want you to believe. Their chains are not unbreakable. Their armies can be defeated. Their ships can burn. The hall was completely silent. 1,000 species held their breath. The Grand Armada is coming for us, Chen Wei continued. The 12 themselves are coming for us. And I will not lie to you. We cannot defeat them alone. But we are not asking you to save us. We are asking you to save yourselves. Rise with us. Fight with us. Be free with us. Or watch from the shadows as we fight alone. Either way, humanity will not surrender. We will meet the 12 in battle, and we will show the galaxy what one species can do when it refuses to be afraid. She looked around the hall one last time. The choice is yours. But remember this. If we fall, they will come for you next. And next time, there will be no one left to inspire you to resist. Then she walked out. The rebellions began that same night on Visser Prime. The insectoid Veth had been slaves for 8,000 years. They were used for construction and mining because their bodies could survive conditions that would kill most species. They had never resisted. They had been taught from birth that resistance was impossible, but they had heard Chen Wei's words. And that night, for the first time in 8,000 years, the Veth fought back. They attacked their overseers with tools meant for digging. They sabotaged the mines. They shut down the factories. Within a week, Visser Prime was free, on the gas giant moons of Kalos. The Windborn had been harvesting fuel for the Dominion for centuries. They lived in floating cities and never touched solid ground. They had always been peaceful. They had never even thought about violence. But they thought about it now. The Windborn destroyed the fuel refineries that powered the Dominion fleet. They set fire to storage facilities that held enough fuel to keep the Grand Armada flying for a century. The Dominion lost more fuel in a single week than they had used in 100 years. Across the galaxy, species that had been silent for millennia found their voices. Some fought with weapons. Some fought with sabotage. Some simply refused to work. Letting the great machine of the Dominion grind to a halt, Admiral James Okonkwo commanded Earth's growing fleet. He was a tall man with gray hair and calm eyes. He had been a military officer before the invasion. He had survived the occupation by pretending to be a farmer. Now he led the largest rebellion the galaxy had ever seen. Ships came to Earth from every corner of space. Some were warships from newly freed worlds. Some were cargo vessels converted into fighters. Some were ancient relics that had been hidden for centuries, waiting for a day that their builders had never believed would come. The liberation. Fleet grew from 200 ships to 2,000, then 20,000, then 60,000. 32 different species flew together under a single banner. Admiral Okonkwo stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the fleet around him. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. All these species, all these worlds, all these people who had decided that freedom was worth fighting for. He opened a channel to every ship in the fleet. His words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything humanity had suffered and everything humanity still believed. Every world that wants freedom will have it. Every tyrant who stands in the way will fall. We are not here to conquer. We are not here to enslave. We are here to liberate. And we will not stop until every chain in the galaxy is broken. The fleet moved toward Dominion Prime. The final battle was coming. Dominion Prime was the oldest world in the galaxy. It had been the home of the 12 for longer than most species had existed. Great cities of crystal and light covered its surface. Temples as tall as mountains honored the ancient rulers. Billions of servants lived there, existing only to worship their masters. No enemy had ever reached Dominion Prime. No fleet had ever dared to approach. The world was protected by defenses that had been building for 50,000 years. It was supposed to be invincible. The Liberation Fleet appeared in the sky like a storm of stars. 60,000 ships from 32 species. Humans and Veth and Windborn and dozens of others. Species that had been enemies for centuries now flew side by side. Species that had never even met before the rebellion now fought for the same cause. Admiral James Okonkwo stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched as the last defenses of the Dominion fell before his fleet. The outer stations were destroyed in the first hour. The defense platforms lasted a little longer. By the end of the first day, there was nothing left between the Liberation Fleet and Dominion Prime itself. But the 12 were waiting. They emerged from their temples and rose into space. They did not need ships. They did not need weapons. Their minds were their weapons. Their power was beyond anything the physical universe could offer. The first voice led them. It was the oldest of the 12, a being of pure energy that had existed since before the first stars burned. It looked at the Liberation Fleet, felt something close to amusement. These creatures thought they could challenge gods? The first voice reached out with its mind. It had destroyed fleets before with a thought. It had shattered worlds with a whisper. The Dominion had always understood war. They knew how to break an enemy's spirit. They would destroy something precious, and the enemy would give up to prevent more destruction. It was simple. It was logical. It worked every time. But the humans did not seem to have spirits that could be broken. When the Dominion destroyed a city, the humans from that city fought harder than before. When the Dominion killed their leaders, 10 new leaders appeared immediately. When the Dominion broadcast warnings about what would happen to resistors, more humans joined the resistance. It was as if destruction made them stronger. Vorth Kell consulted with the ancient records. Surely some other species had behaved this way. Surely there was a precedent for this madness. But there was nothing. No species in 50,000 years had responded to overwhelming force with more resistance instead of less. Meanwhile, the humans were learning. They were fast learners, faster than any species the Dominion had encountered. They captured Dominion weapons and figured out how to use them within days. They captured Dominion soldiers and learned their tactics, their weaknesses, their fears. They shared information across their global networks, so that a lesson learned in Asia was being used in Africa within hours. The tide was not turning, not yet. The humans were still losing. But they were losing more slowly than they should have been. And something else was happening, something that worried the Dominion commanders even more. The humans were planning deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. In a bunker that even the Dominion scanners could not find, Project Prometheus was taking shape. The best human minds had gathered there. Scientists, engineers, hackers, inventors. They worked 20 hours a day. They slept on the floor. They ate whatever they could find. And they studied every piece of Dominion technology they could get their hands on. Dr. Yuki Tanaka was in charge of the project. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes. 3 months ago, she had been a professor at a university in Japan. Then the Dominion had bombed Kyoto. Her husband had died in the first explosion. Her daughter had died trying to rescue survivors. Now Dr. Tanaka had only one reason to keep living. She wanted revenge. But she was not a soldier. She could not fight with guns or bombs. Her weapons were her mind and her knowledge. So she worked on Prometheus, pouring all of her grief and rage into the project. She barely spoke to anyone except to ask questions or give orders. Her colleagues worried about her, but no one could argue with her results. Dr. Tanaka had discovered something important. The Dominion fleet was connected by a neural network. Every ship shared information with every other ship. This made them incredibly efficient. A lesson learned on one ship was instantly known by all ships. Commands could be given to thousands of vessels at the same time, but it also meant that every ship had the same weakness. If Dr. Tanaka could create a virus that could infect one ship, it would spread to all ships. The same connection that made the Dominion strong could be turned against them. Their greatest advantage could become their greatest vulnerability. The problem was time. The virus was complicated. It needed to be perfect. One mistake and the Dominion would find and fix the weakness before the virus could spread. They had only one chance to get this right. Above ground, humanity was buying that time with blood. Every day that the Resistance fought was another day for Prometheus to develop. Every soldier who died was giving the scientists more hours to work. It was a terrible exchange, but it was the only option they had. 8 months into the invasion, Borothkel received a report that made him sit in silence for a long time. His forces had killed 30 million humans. They had destroyed dozens of cities. They had captured half of the planet, and human resistance was stronger than ever. He finally asked the question that had been haunting him for months. What are we dealing with here? No one had an answer, but deep beneath the mountains, Dr. Tanaka smiled as she watched the final pieces of Prometheus come together. 3 more months. They just needed 3 more months. And then the galaxy would learn what happened when you pushed humanity too far. The Dominion thought they were winning. They had the idea that their defeat was already being built. 11 months had passed since the Dominion arrived at Earth. 11 months of blood and fire and death. 11 months of fighting against an enemy that should have crushed humanity in weeks. The humans had lost half their planet. They had lost 100 million people. They had lost battles and cities and hope, but they had not lost the war. Not yet. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Yuki Tanaka stood before a screen showing lines of code. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep. Her hands shook slightly from too much coffee. She had not left the bunker in 4 months. She had forgotten what sunlight felt like. But none of that mattered now. Prometheus was complete. The virus was a masterpiece of programming. It would enter the Dominion neural network through any connected ship. Then it would spread silently, hiding inside routine communications, copying itself 1,000,000 times before anyone noticed. And when it activated, every system on every connected ship would fail at the same moment. Navigation would stop working. Weapons would lock. Shields would fall. Life support would flicker. The great fleet that had conquered half a galaxy would become nothing more than floating. Metal boxes. Dr. Tanaka turned to her team. They were exhausted and scared and proud. They had done something impossible. They had found a way to fight back against gods. Send the signal, she said. Tell the Resistance. It's time. The signal went out across the world through hidden channels and coded messages. In occupied cities, Resistance fighters prepared for one final push. In hidden bases, human pilots ran to their ships. On the moon, in the deep oceans, in cargo vessels that everyone thought had been destroyed, humanity's secret fleet came to life. 200 ships. That was all humanity had. 200 vessels built in secret from stolen technology and salvaged parts. Each one was crewed by volunteers who knew they probably would not survive. They were farmers and teachers and factory workers who had learned to fly. They were the last hope of a dying species. Against them stood 3,000 Dominion warships. The greatest fleet ever assembled against a single planet. High Arbiter Vorithkel was preparing for a ceremony. He called it Pacification Day. After 11 months, he had decided that Earth was sufficiently broken. He would broadcast humanity's surrender to the entire galaxy. It would serve as a reminder to other species about what happened to those who resisted. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, surrounded by his officers. Cameras were recording. The broadcast was ready to begin. Vorithkel smiled his crystalline smile and began to speak. Citizens of the Dominion, today we celebrate another victory for civilization. The humans of Earth have finally accepted their place in our great order. Their resistance, while unusually prolonged, has ended as all resistance ends. In submission, in obedience, in proper respect for their betters, he gestured toward the planet below. Let this be a lesson to all species who dream of defiance. The Dominion is eternal. The Dominion is inevitable. The Dominion cannot be defeated. That was the moment when every light on his ship went out. The bridge was plunged into darkness. Emergency lights flickered on, casting everything in red. Alarms began to scream. Officers ran to their stations, shouting in confusion. Vorath Kell grabbed a console to steady himself as the ship shuddered. "What is happening?" he demanded. Commander Salith's voice came from somewhere in the chaos. "Hi, Arbiter. We have lost navigation. We have lost weapons. We have lost everything. The neural network is infected with something, some kind of virus. It is spreading to every ship in the fleet." Vorath Kell felt his crystalline body grow cold. "Can we stop it?" "No, it is already too late. Every ship that was connected to the network is infected. That is all of them. Every single ship outside the Dominion fleet was dying. 3,000 warships drifted helplessly through space. Their weapons would not fire. Their shields would not raise. Their engines would not start. The greatest military force in the galaxy had been reduced to floating targets and rising from Earth. From the moon, from the oceans, came humanity's revenge. The 200 human ships were small and primitive compared to the Dominion vessels. But they worked. Their weapons fired. Their shields held. And their pilots had 11 months of rage burning in their hearts. Captain Maria Santos led the attack. She was 40 years old. She had been a cargo pilot before the war. She had lost her entire family in the Battle of Snowpallo. Now, she commanded the Human Liberation Fleet. And she had a message for the aliens who had taken everything from her. All ships, engage at will. No mercy, no prisoners. Remember everyone we lost. Remember why we fight. The battle was not a battle. It was an execution. Dominion ships that had destroyed cities were torn apart by human missiles. Commanders who had ordered massacres died screaming as their vessels exploded around them. The great fleet that had never known defeat was shattered in hours. Vorath Kell watched from his dying flagship as his empire crumbled. He had time to send one final message, broadcast across every frequency in the galaxy. His voice was no longer calm. It was filled with something he had never felt before. Pure, absolute disbelief. They were supposed to be primitive. Then his ship exploded, and the High Arbiter of the Dominion was no. The stars had always been quiet. For 50,000 years, the Dominion of 12 had ruled the galaxy without challenge. They were the oldest species, the most powerful beings ever to exist. 12 ancient races had joined together long ago. They had conquered every corner of space. They had broken every species they found, and they had never, not even once, failed to bring a new world under their control. High Arbiter Vorath Kell stood on the bridge of his flagship. He was a tall creature made of living crystal. Light passed through his body and came out in rainbow colors. He had lived for 3,000 years. He had personally overseen the submission of 63 different species. To him, this mission was routine. It was boring even. Just another primitive world to add to the collection. Earth appeared on the viewing screen. A small blue planet covered in water and green land. The humans who lived there had only recently learned to travel between stars. Their ships were slow and weak. They had no mental powers. They could not speak with their minds like the elder races. They were divided into many small nations that argued with each other constantly. Vorath Kell looked at the planet and felt nothing but mild contempt. These creatures would be useful as workers, nothing more. They would mine rocks on distant moons. They would build things for their betters. This was the natural order of the galaxy. The compliance fleet filled the space around Earth. 3,000 warships, each one capable of destroying a city in seconds. The fleet carried millions of soldiers from dozens of conquered species. All of them served the Dominion now. All of them had learned their place. Vorath Kell opened a communication channel to the planet below. His message was broadcast to every screen, every radio, every device on Earth. He spoke in a calm voice, the voice of someone who had never been told no. People of Earth, I am High Arbiter Vorath Kell of the Dominion of 12. Your planet has been selected for integration into our great civilization. You will surrender your governments. You will accept neural conditioning to ensure proper behavior. You will serve in whatever capacity we require. This is not a request. This is not a negotiation. This is simply what will happen. He paused for a moment, allowing his words to sink in across the world below. You have 1 solar cycle to prepare your surrender. Resistance is not recommended. In 50,000 years, no species has ever successfully defied the Dominion. Those who have tried no longer exist. Consider this carefully. Vorathkel ended the transmission and turned to his second-in-command, a large reptilian creature named Salith. How long do you think they will take to respond? The standard time is usually 12 hours of panic followed by submission.
House.
Salith checked his instruments. The humans are communicating rapidly among themselves. Their networks are very active. They seem to be ... arguing. Of course they are arguing, Vorathkel said with a slight smile. The weak always argue before they kneel. But the response came faster than either of them expected. 6 hours after his ultimatum, a single message arrived from Earth. It came from something called the United Earth Emergency Council. The message contained only one word. No. Vor read the message 3 times. He felt something strange in his crystalline body, a vibration he did not recognize. Surely this was a mistake. Perhaps the humans had misunderstood. Perhaps their translation was faulty. Send clarification, he ordered. Explain what will happen if they refuse. The clarification was sent. It detailed in precise terms how the Dominion would destroy their cities, how their people would be enslaved, how their culture would be erased. It included images of other worlds that had resisted. Those images were not pleasant. Earth's second response came within an hour. This time it was longer. We understand your threats perfectly. We have discussed your offer as a species. We have argued, as you predicted. Some of us wanted to surrender. Some of us wanted to fight. In the end, we voted. The vote was not close. Humanity chooses freedom. We choose to fight. We may lose. You may destroy us. But we will not kneel. Not today. Not ever. If you want our planet, come and take it. We will be waiting. The message was signed by 247 nations and 300 independent territories. It represented every human being on Earth. Vorathkel stared at the message for a long time. In 3,000 years, he had never seen anything like it. Every other species had tried to negotiate. Every other species had begged for better terms. Every other species had looked for a way to save themselves. These humans were not trying to save themselves. They were not even trying to survive. They were simply refusing. Commander Salith spoke carefully. High Arbiter, perhaps we should report this to the 12 before proceeding. This response is ... unusual. Unusual does not mean dangerous, Vorathkel replied. But even as he said the words, he felt that strange vibration again. It was uncomfortable. It made him want to move, to act, to do something. He finally recognized the feeling. It was the first whisper of fear. He pushed it away. He was being foolish. These were primitive creatures with primitive weapons. They had no idea what they were facing. Their bravery was just ignorance, dressed up in pretty words. Begin the invasion, he ordered. Standard protocol. 6 landing zones across their major continents. We will teach them what happens to species that refuse the Dominion. As his orders spread through the fleet, Vorathkel looked at the blue planet one more time. It looked so peaceful from up here, so fragile, so easy to break. But somewhere deep in his ancient mind, a small voice whispered that this time might be different. He ignored the voice. He had conquered 63 species. He had broken worlds that were far more advanced than this one. Earth would fall like all the others. He was wrong. Down on the planet below, humanity was preparing. Factories that made cars were switching to make weapons. Scientists were studying every piece of alien technology they could find. Soldiers were training in new tactics. Old enemies were becoming allies. Nations that had argued for centuries were now working together, and deep beneath a mountain range in what the humans called North America, a secret project was beginning. The humans called it Prometheus. It would take them 11 months to finish it. They just needed to survive long enough to complete it. Voreth Kel had given them plenty of time to surrender. He had no idea that he had also given them time to prepare their revenge. The first Dominion soldiers landed on Earth 3 days later. They expected fear. They expected chaos. They expected the quick collapse that always came when primitive species faced superior firepower. What they found was something else entirely. They found humanity waiting for them. Weapons in hand, fire in their eyes, and absolutely no intention of ever giving up. The galaxy was about to learn that some species cannot be controlled, and humanity was about to teach that lesson in ways the Dominion would never forget. The Dominion soldiers landed on 6 continents at the same time. They came in massive ships that blocked out the sun. They wore armor that could stop any human bullet. They carried weapons that could melt steel with a single shot. There were millions of them. And they had conquered dozens of worlds before this one. Their commanders expected the invasion to last 2 weeks at most. They had seen this before. First there would be panic, then scattered resistance, then surrender, then obedience. It was always the same pattern. Every species broke eventually, but the humans did not follow the pattern. In the first week, the Dominion forces captured 3 major cities. They raised their flags and declared victory. They sent reports back to High Arbiter Voreth Kel, saying that Earth was falling as expected. Everything was going according to plan. Then the second week began, and everything changed. The humans did not run from the occupied cities. They stayed. They hid in buildings and tunnels and sewers. They attacked at night when the Dominion soldiers were resting. They used weapons made from kitchen knives and construction tools. They used cars as bombs. They used their own bodies as shields to let others escape. Commander Salith led the ground forces in Europe. He was a veteran of 12 planetary conquests. He had never seen anything like what he saw on Earth. His soldiers would clear a building, declare it safe, and then be attacked from that same building an hour later. The humans seemed to appear from nowhere and disappear just as quickly. One night, he watched a group of human farmers attack a Dominion supply convoy. The farmers had no armor. Their weapons were old and weak. They knew they would die. They attacked anyway. They destroyed 3 supply vehicles before they were killed. Every single one of them died with a smile on their face. Salith sent a message to Voreth Kel that night. His words were confused and frightened. High Arbiter, I do not understand these creatures. We have superior numbers. We have superior weapons. We have superior everything. But they do not care. They fight when they cannot win. They die when they could surrender. They laugh when they should cry. I have seen a human child throw a rock at a battle tank. What species does this? What kind of mind thinks this is acceptable? Voreth Kel read the message with growing concern. He was receiving similar reports from all 6 continents. The humans were not winning. They were losing badly. They had lost cities, lost battles, lost millions of their people. But they were not stopping. They were not even slowing down.